Thank you everyone for joining. We'll just go straight to it. Kate Otten is our speaker this morning, all the way from Joburg. So I'm gonna read the bio and then she'll start the presentation after. Kate Otten is an architect of place. Her work is rooted in the context of South Africa, its landscape, materiality, culture, and politics. The work has consistently sought to define what it means to be a South African practice through collaboration, experimentation, hands-on inquiry, and people. Her practice, Cadon Ocean Architects, has produced work of a different and distinct sensibility. Kate, over to you.
Thank you. So morning, everyone. I can't see anyone except, okay, now I can't see anyone at all. Okay. Hi, and thank you for inviting me here. I think I'm just going to start by reading because I think that way we settle one's nerves, really. So at the AZA conference earlier this year, I shared a panel with SAOTA, DHK, and Councillor Mandisa Pepeta to discuss what it takes to build big while staying grounded, holding the center of identity, responsibility, and context, even as the edges expand. Concluding that size really is relative, I spoke instead about the impact and the reach that the work of my practice has had over the last 36 years, rather than its size in numbers. The title of my talk, Build Like a Woman, is inspired by the Nike advertising campaign, Run Like a Girl, where boys were asked to run like a girl. So they flapped their arms about and ran like ducks. The point of the campaign, I believe, was to show that girls or women's inability is a myth, and that women, probably especially when they are wearing Nike footwear, are in fact extraordinary runners. This presentation is the story of how this runner, me, and her practice is really no waddling duck, and how through engaging a particular and authentic voice, the work of KOA, Kate Otten Architects, has produced work of a different and distinct sensibility, rooted in and defined by what it means to be an in brackets, South African architectural practice. The story starts with this pastel drawing I did aged 7 that my office found quite by accident while searching through our drawing filing cabinets. The numbers 1, 3, and 7 appear on the drawing, all lucky numbers for me. The fantastic chickens living in a happy open structure with feeders and a water fountain. Me smiling and punching forward, determined from the start. The icons of our website are inspired by that. The water icon or fountain of life represents the people in the practice. The structure and feeders are projects. This is also the icon that we use for invoices that bring in the bacon, so to speak. The chicken is called stuff and represents all the other things we engage in that are not hardcore architecture, but that inform our work and life in the practice. This image is of all the people that I have worked with in the practice over the past 36 years. I imagine that SAOTA and DHK, who were part of this initial panel, have about 3 or 4 times this number as a daily average. Many of these people here have gone on to start their own practices, become partners in what I call big practices, engage in teaching and research and other local and international endeavors. You will, of course, notice that the practice has always had a strong female voice. It has also been a safe space for a diverse group of people. And so on to the projects and the built work. As architects often do, we have designed and built many unusual private homes that I have thoroughly enjoyed making and which have also served to make the practice visible. Sometimes we have had to contend with the tasteful design guidelines of gated estates, while other houses have been located in more free and extraordinary places. Excuse me. Beyond private houses, our work involves community projects, small public buildings, boutique commercial and retail space, as well as projects for university campuses, including the Wits Rural Campus. The relatively small scale of the buildings has enabled us to engage at a human and personal level that involves the client, the makers, and the end users. The buildings are varied, each responding to the particularities of site, brief, and context. Some have a graphic quality. This here is the fire escape stair at night, or the bridge over the M1 highway connecting the east and the west campus of Wits University. The graphic quality can also be captured in a photograph, a moment in time that frames a particular view, mood, or understanding of the building. Material simplicity and a quiet color palette create a mood of tranquility at this image, which is of the Wits Rural Facility. Or this here, a suburban writer's retreat, this dollhouse at the bottom of her fancy pants Westcliff house. Or the formal reception area of this legal practice that we did their small office for. This image shows how space can transform an atmosphere. This is the ceiling over a conference facility boardroom, which you can imagine could change the mood of aggressive capitalism to something much more inclusive. The idea that through design you can give clarity or alter meaning in a building. Here, at the existing 8-story Wits Great House building. Oh, sorry, when I do that, you can't see me. So this building is an 8-story building. It has got and all the lobbies are similar. So what we decided to do was to change, to kind of make it personal, to change, make each floor a different color. And then it at first was conceptualized as being part of, that it would be the pride flag. But when you actually look at the colors individually of the pride flag, and there are so many, you'd have to choose one, they can be quite oppressive. So in the end, we decided to go with more kind of cheerful colors. The choice of craft and material is a specific response to the context of each project. Available materials, available skills, and how we can use these resources to express the idea of architecture. So you can see here, I mean, you'll see always through my work, gum poles, one of my favorite sort of local materials. And then how crafting these things have kind of moved it out of the ordinary and into something unusual and extraordinary. Or here where the building or the materials respond to, so in Joburg, I'm sure it's the same in Durban, but there's an awful lot of fear and worry about security. So this is a courtyard space that's got this kind of curvy cage over it. So while you can sleep with all the doors open, at the same time you can feel safe and secure and see trees and leaves and, you know, at night the moon, etc. Or this image here where, you know, instead of having an electric fence that buzzes all the time from stainless steel to cut out these kind of plant-like formations. Animation of the building. So there's been through the work this kind of interaction and with craftspeople and to kind of encourage the different personalities within those engaged in the project to express themselves. So making a security balustrade or a balustrade that you don't fall over the edge, but making it a delight and animating the building. Or these which are skylights with kind of Zulu hats on and in the barely beaded necklace, neck. And the use of bottles to kind of create light that filters through or that sparkles as the sun comes through it. So another thing that, and this kind of all speaks to this idea of engaging with people actually physically on site, which unless you're doing buildings of, if you're doing massive kind of multi-story buildings, it really isn't something that one can engage with. So the scale of the work that we've been involved with, I think, has been important to maintain that and to maintain a kind of intimacy with the work. So these towers, which are actually skylights, were overplastered and then hosed down so that you would get this incredible. So you see those sort of rivulets and then just sealed so that once it had all the plaster had all kind of slumped, that it would not continue to do that. So also a very kind of hands-on approach. And this, which is the art therapy building in Soweto, done many years ago, is a lovely example of how a way that we've kind of worked, where the drawings are done and set up almost as the kind of defining of the constraints of the building and how generally it should be. But the specifics of how the pattern goes, where which brick is, and the exact final shape is in fact governed by the people who are making it. I asked, there were two bricklayers, I asked them to make me samples, I showed some images, etc. Came back a week later and the whole building was finished. So there's a wonderful thing that happens, I think, when people kind of engage with enthusiasm. And this feeling of a handmade structure that it kind of opens you up to a human condition. So, I mean, particularly, I suppose, with AI overcoming our lives, I think to be able to do, something that is much more connected is really valuable. So light and shadow play a very important part in the work, and light coming from above, obviously uncontrolled. So then how do you control that and work where it falls so that it doesn't just become a cooker? And I think this goes on to talk about the kind of mood of buildings as well, where you can create this incredible light inside, which also serves to particularly in this picture, kind of integrate between the inside and the outside so that the elements kind of become part of the inside of the building and not just something that you kind of look at from inside. And I think that's important how you experience the building from inside. I think all too often architects tend to look at the image of a building, but in fact, that is never how you experience a building. An elevation, even a perspective, an artist's impression even is never how you experience a building. So I think that thinking about being in a building is very important to how to make space. And these skylights, so a gallery space that's between the public rooms of the house and the private rooms of the house. So a space that doesn't itself have access to sort of outdoor light. But these skylights then create this lovely mood of and make light fall in sort of certain places. Ultimately, it was kind of laid out where the sculptures went, where walls that didn't receive sun got paintings, and so yeah, it's a very lovely space to be in. And this, which is a series of three, was very interesting. So the client, as clients often do, they bring you sort of pictures of things that they like, and I encourage that. I think it's very nice, but the house clients particularly. And they only ever brought me pictures of plants and of trees, which I thought was quite amazing. So this is the entrance to their house, which is this massive gallery, conceived of as a, let me just show you the next slide. So you can see all these gumpoles that become the forest that starts on the outside and then moves through to the inside of the house. So the structure that holds up this double volume gallery space almost becomes like the canopy of trees with the skylights and the lights kind of randomly placed so that you get this effect of a canopy and how light would come through that. And, depending on where the sun is coming from, north is to the left. So, in summer, it would be much more vertical and make patterns on the floor, whereas this is probably mid-season or towards winter where it's making shadows on the wall. You can't quite see that there, but it's this. We'll talk about that. So hand making is a very kind of core to kind of how I operate. Our process of making architecture is iterative and moves between drawing by hand and digital drawing, and then back to hand drawing. We love building physical models and find them a very useful tool for both ourselves and for our clients. And I think models are also this kind of jewel that, when I present models to a client, I usually hide them. And then after having been through the drawings, etc., it's kind of like let the rabbit out the hat. And I don't know, there's something sort of exquisite about being able to carry your building around in a little, I suppose, just, by hand. And so, hand, I think it's this connection between hand, eye, mind, and the drawing and the process of drawing. And I've always been and continue to be a very firm believer in the importance of that. Um, I can, as you can see, barely operate a PowerPoint presentation. No, I've got much better over the years, but I think there's something that only working on a computer you lose, and it's sort of something very particular about scale, but there's also about the action of which pen, which pencil, what paper, is it rough, is it smooth? How does that kind of influence how you imagine? And that together with making models, kind of how do you imagine space and what triggers how you imagine space. And I think this was a very interesting, and which I often do, is to work at sort of scale of 1 to 1, whereas an architect, you're always drawing things that are not necessarily representative. So this, for example, we worked the graphics on the computer. It's a gate. The thing is sort of a bit squonk. It's actually a whole flat facade. I'm drawing on this gate, always the dogs lying around with me, and Lele is doing the ones on those. So we then blew the flowers up, stuck them on, traced over them. Um, and the point being that to work at the scale of 1 to 1, to actually physically engage as an architect in painting. I mean, you'd be surprised how few architects can actually change a light bulb. And I think there's a thing about being able to physically, I don't know that you should necessarily all be bricklayers, but to be able to physically engage with making, there's something really sort of special about it. And this was sort of a 2 or 3 day process, and Lele and I had really a good time. I think he really enjoyed it as well. And this is a graphic of, sorry, of that roof, which has been generated by a computer. And I just think it's a very beautiful drawing. In fact, I think I should hang it on my wall. But what's interesting for me is I think to arrive at this in reverse is what is, in a way, its beauty, as opposed to having to try to get a computer to make this, to make that in order to make this, I think just doesn't work logically. So the hand and the mind and the human factor, I think, is all very important. This is a mat so that is the geology, or that is the geology under the area of the Vredefort Johannesburg, and the where the great impact site happened, and how it was meant to be a mat that was part of the exhibition. Never quite happened. It sits now in my dressing room, which is very nice. But how you can translate what is this diagram into that which we computer generated, and then made a 1 to 1 so that it could then be woven, kind of following a pattern. And engaging also with artists. So these icons were made by Marco Cianfinelli, and we've sort of over the years had relationships with artists. Clive van der Berg is also one of them who we've often worked with. But how, I guess, that brings another dimension to a structure. So, the idea of public art, or that you engage at different levels with the building, and it isn't always just this kind of blank glass facade. And again, mosaics, a kind of idea of reusing old materials or materials that have been thrown away from another site and how to make that into something wonderful. So I guess when I started and I suppose generally budgets have been really tight, so it's how to make more out of what you've got than necessarily always having to buy new. And many of these mosaics have been I personally have done them, or I've done them with people, and we've kind of marked them up and carried them across. And of course, the proverbial COVID mask, I think that everybody made. Again, models, and there's a thing also for me about photographing models and well, just how you photograph buildings or moments, as I was talking about earlier, and this is kind of one of them. I think that we should create something so simple and evocative. And how we used to color in, this is me coloring in a presentation for Wits University for the International House Students Residents, probably 20 years ago, maybe more, actually. And using, lovely Derwent pencils that were given to me for my 21st. I think it's something that people just don't do. Or making this model, which is a lot more kind of cheerful and animated. And I think also about scale. So this is fabric, shwe fabric that's been photographed or scanned and, blown up. And so you get this very lovely patterned effect that happens there. Moving to also heritage buildings, which have been, so the women's jail is probably the first one that I did that I think I'm going to read this because it's easier than mumbling along. We have a real interest in working with built heritage, which for us always raises the question of whose heritage and involves particularly careful research, thought, and engagement, especially when working on important public buildings like the women's jail. We describe the work as rescripting, as it is not about slavishly restoring colonial edifices, but rather about revealing the story of these buildings and the people who inhabited them. Also, I think, which is important in this building, was kind of, and in other heritage work, is to kind of suggest a future. So, particularly important in the women's jail, and I think also something that, as opposed to it being kind of high architecture and accessible to a few elite, to make a building that is really quite open and obvious to the public. So this idea of jumping out, the building kind of jumps out at the confines of the prison. And I think that sort of symbolism, and that it was done so overtly, was a very kind of particular decision made. And also that it happens kind of on the entrance to the Constitutional Hill building. There is the Hillbrow Tower in the background. And that by jumping out and going up, you then reveal this incredible view, which was something that certainly the prisoners didn't ever, often or largely political prisoners at a certain point that had no access to viewing the outside. And, this kind of looks on to the ridge where kind of all the landlords used to live when Joburg was first established. And so an interesting kind of shift of how or what you see and how that is defined. And then, so I suppose architecturally respecting the fabric that is there, but and so the kind of combination between them. But these screens then representing the sky. If you kind of squint a bit, you can see it's a cloud. And the sky being the only freedom or the only that you could not take away from prisoners. So they could always see the sky. And the bits that are cut out from those screens are then used at the bottom screens, much like a tapestry. So women were brought tapestries to kind of, while away the time. The kind of lace also. So whilst it's this very tough steel, it also has the somewhat more delicate feminine sense. We got this year, this very first time, a blue plaque, which was very exciting. For this, the planetarium, formerly the planetarium, now the Digital Dome at Wits University. So quite an important, I suppose, an iconic building in Joburg, but also, it's kind of the public-private or the engagement between the city and community of Johannesburg and Wits University. And a complex brief, because this in the foreground here is the soccer field, which you can imagine is very, excuse me, noisy, and whereas the auditorium, which is where the shows happen, is quiet, and so they're sort of potentially in conflict, along with the offices, etc., and teaching spaces or entry and ablution spaces that belong to here. So that combined with working with an existing and an old building meant, an existing and a new building, how to kind of not devalue this very important iconic building, but to create new structures that were also useful, and use that to unravel the brief, or not to unravel it, to make it work properly. So you can see this here is the main, so each part of the building kind of can function completely separately or can function collectively. So to the right, and I can't see it here because I've got everybody else's pictures, but is the historic entrance, which is the formal way into the auditorium space, the domed space, or here, which you turn left into the offices, etc., or right down to the left, you can get into the sports fields. And then how this dome, which is this beautiful green copper dome that you see as you drive past on the highway, then gets a sort of contemporary cousin, being this is will ultimately be also a green but box, not a dome, because it's got plants that are climbing up. But this was winter a year ago, and so it's pretty miserable. And then these are the old doors or the historic doors, the original doors to the foyer looked at from the inside, and you see here these constellations, which we then, using that as the kind of reference and the night sky above Joburg, we then made these screens that screen the west light from the offices, and they then use those icons and the light above, or the sky above, night sky above, as the symbols. And this is in the new sort of office section looking across there, and you can see a far distance of the foyer are these built-in seats. There's a kitchen, there are new doors, etc. And they were made by reusing the old lab tops that were recycled, if you like, from another part of the Wits University. And the project that we've been sort of really enjoying over the past year or so, which is a building done by Pancho Guedes, and I presume you all know who he was, but my year at Wits University was the last year that we had Pancho as head of department. And so it's been an incredible honor to be able to work with his building that had been kind of stripped and left to go to ruin, and to kind of bring it back to life, but also to move it forward, make it more suitable for the clients. Meaning more, that the spaces work better for them. And what's very interesting, you can see here, across the road on the other side, that is in fact their house. So they kept watching this property kind of fall apart, and then thought, oh gosh, we have to buy it. And then became this whole, well, we'll kind of save it, I suppose. Became this whole journey of understanding the value of heritage, understanding the beauty of it, the building, in many ways, kind of understanding the idiosyncratic way, in many ways, that Pancho worked, but also just how clever this building is. So the sort of perfect 2.4, again 2.4, that's represented in the drawings, is exactly how it's built, and this kind of magical way that this incredibly simple form just becomes incredibly powerful. I was there the other day with the guys who I garden with on weekends, and they were just absolutely struck, saying, I've never seen a house like this. I've never seen a house like this. So being able to kind of bring this back to life and to have the clients come on this journey, which I think is a very brave journey, because it certainly was far out of their comfort zone, And I think that's the beauty also of being able to recognize the value in something that's already existing, and then how to make it yours, claim it for yours, but without kind of undoing it. So all of these bits here are new, but nothing is done to undo what is the sort of core of the building. So even though some of the spaces were sort of quite small and pokey, the way that that was addressed was to very much keep in mind how that the building spoke and how the building had initially been designed and kind of what was its intent. So, for example, where's my arrow there? There was this very tiny bathroom, so we've kind of expanded that and made showers that go beyond. So these spaces can then have a whole new life, but without losing the great beauty of what Pancho had designed there. And this, I have to have some water, excuse me. I think one of the most exciting heritage projects that I've worked on, which is this, I guess, a landlord's house in Westcliff with this incredible garden that was very much part of its history or part of its kind of heritage value. So that to a certain extent we restored, but then built this pavilion in the garden, which has this. So if you see here going up the one on the left-hand side, there's a ramp and there's another one that goes up so that you get to the level of the house. And these were these existing stone walls in the. It's very funny. This pictures. This is when the lights were being protected, so it's obviously sort of not complete, but I think it shows this wall very beautifully. So the two garden walls, retaining walls of stone, became the point of departure in designing this. And instead of trying to kind of keep the water out, what we decided to do was to let the water come in, but then to create this channel here so that the water gets collected and is taken out, so that the heritage is, or the history or the story of the landscape is becomes very much part of the current narrative. And also how this works, which is really interesting, we have no rain in winter and it rains in summer in Johannesburg. And so in winter, this is dry and not cold. Whereas in summer, this here is effectively become a kind of cooling device. So it remains wet and the water cools the building. You can see again there. And what this, and then you can see how the building has been designed that even though it's sort of 200 square meters of what is ostensibly office space, her office, that the building never, the historic building is never overpowered by what's happening down below. And you always see through this building with to that stone wall beyond. And how the building becomes with this pond that's on the top. So it kind of it's camouflaged, if you like, into the garden, which was part of the very strong part of the history of the building, and how the garden is then reflected in it. So this massive building just becomes kind of quite invisible, but also that as you look down onto it, you don't see roofs, etc., but rather more garden and more plants. The next few images talk about landscape and how buildings kind of fit into their landscape. And so it's very odd. Here's this like South African condition of fencing, which is just exhausting. But how the building has been designed to be sort of fragmented and quite horizontal, and using this is in the Cape in Pringle Bay, and using the colors of the fynbos to kind of, gosh, I have to hurry along a bit, that it recedes into the, well, that it becomes part of the landscape, and you see all the materials, so the stone, etc., comes from the landscape, and that it doesn't kind of poke out as this, I don't know, big lump in the landscape, and also the interest in pattern and how that looks against the sky. This is Misty Cliff's similar kind of landscape in a way, but much steeper. And again, all the stone used from the site and colors, etc. So you can see, and then the shapes of the structure reflecting the mountains that it is surrounded by, as it kind of wanders or steps down the mountain, and kind of uses or is informed by the surrounds, by the landscape. Or this in an urban context where this very long 25-meter lap pool, which is also a biopool, then integrates with the building. So, and here where the public space of the street is integrated into the building, which is an unusual thing in Joburg because people are so concerned about high walls and electric fences. So to kind of invite the public, and this is often used as a place where people will come and have wedding photos or just, lots of social media images that people sort of sit here and pose, and it's rather lovely. And this building, which is in Parkhurst, in a high street. So this line of the veranda is in fact the edge of the site, but instead of maximizing the retail space and bringing it out to there and leaving this very puny space to walk through, the buildings are set back so that you walk undercover and do exactly what these two women are doing, linger and look, which is really, I think, what the retail part is trying to gain. Materials and just that kind of so the idea of the boundary, this is a retaining wall, so or this boundary where that becomes, it's quite a fast road, Jansmans Avenue, and busy, so the building becomes this layering of plants and kind of disappears into the landscape. This building looks very much, or one of the kind of key ideas behind this is the idea of the fabricating of landscapes. So where you don't have one, that you can make one. So whilst this might look like it's a bush lodge somewhere, this text here, and there's also another one further along, comes from my client, who was an absolutely amazing client. Always sort of glass half full, but also somebody who really admired and respected our work, kind of rolled out the red carpet. And truly, when we came, to have a client like that is a very special thing. And he very sadly died of COVID before his second house was complete. So this is his office building, and his ideas there. But I think it also alludes to this idea of collaborating with clients, which is something that I think is very important, so that people can own the building when you leave, that it's not yours, it's theirs. And how by fabricating these landscapes, you create an incredible kind of environment that perhaps didn't exist before. And it's a very much I think, a Joburg thing. I mean, the whole of Joburg is in fact a fabricated landscape. All the trees here, the large man-made forest that we are, all came initially from mining, in fact. So to do that, I think, is a very Joburg thing. And then the other way around, where the building can kind of, if you like, yield to the garden, to the planting, to what is existing in there. And that does that particularly at the Wits Rural Facility, where the buildings move and meander and wander through a lot of the existing indigenous trees that are there. We only ever took away 2 trees, despite there being quite sort of densely wooded. One that was an exotic and one that was not endemic to the area. And how the outside and the inside kind of have this relationship. So having this large glass facade, which would normally be a cooker, but it's in this garden with all these beautiful trees. So you get this wonderful dappled light and a wonderful scent from the gardens, from the flowers in the garden. And using this landscape and inside and outside, so that you can create, this is a kind of small meeting space for where the partner would meet with his silks before court. And you can imagine how that I suppose kind of, the ease with which you might communicate is different to sitting in a very formal environment. And the inside and the outside. So here the roof kind of goes from the inside to the outside and kind of confusing that and inviting both one to the other. And interiors, I think, where you're lucky enough to do them are very much, I think, a very important part of how a building is finished and how you can, I guess, animate a building or occupy it and make it a beautiful space for people to be in. We don't often get that luxury of doing the interiors, but it is something that we really do enjoy doing. The more formal boardrooms, so that it is intentional that you have a massive table and you sort of slightly intimidate the opposition, again in the legal practice with these wonderful gold lights and this massive painting that we commissioned Clive Vandenberg to do. And going down to the sort of detail of joinery and how that is, the finesse of that and the touch of that. And that as architects, we can design from sort of the macro scale down to the sort of minutiae, which I think is really wonderful. We are running over time, but I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit. So the next section, this is images of the different, what I made as sculptures for the, it's freezing up here. Sorry, you're lucky you're in Durban. For the Sophia Gray exhibition, and each one of these are what I call constructions for self. So buildings that have been built either for myself, for my office, or for my family. And it's something that it's these buildings are kind of testing grounds for other structures that we may build for clients. So we'll kind of try things out and see how they pan out. And then use them in the other projects. So the very first one, which was the Pineapple Republic, and my love for Hassan Fatih and kind of emulating how he draws these elevations that kind of flop out. And my fondness for creatures and animals and kind of, everything that gets inhabited and thought about. And the structure of this being this undulating roof doing with corrugated iron, but in the opposite direction. So it kind of, instead of cranking the sheeting actually just falls. So you build a whole regular roof and then tip the whole roof. So then that idea of how that worked then became something that we used in clients' houses. But also this very much hands-on, the collecting of materials from, I suppose, demolitions or just unloved pieces on the side of the road. The house in Utopia, which was a gift to my partner, so it was wrapped in a red ribbon. Wasn't such a loved gift, but nonetheless, we moved along from that. But there was our house in Utopia. So here testing, you can see how this plaster is raked and how that became in fact part of what is our house now. All these cantilevering stairs where you build in the one side. So you build them flat on the ground and then kind of build them in as you would bricks or lintels, so that you can create a staircase that way. A painting done by Adriette of what on my pencil case. So this here then is the property that I've owned. It's nearly not mine. That goes kind of from the one street all the way down to the bottom of Melville, very steep hill. And this here was built out of all the rock that we found on site. So small pieces of rock and then built as a double skin as you would a brick. So I think probably quite an unusual way of building, but it seemed to have worked very well. And then again, all the tiles that were collected from Peter Kroll's studio when he died, and used as this very long kind of, so water pours down here. So it's this windowsill that kind of pours down the wall, or the cupboard that's floating in that manner so that you can have the theory was different length dresses. And then my Lulu Kati Kati, which I feel like I am abandoning her. I have accepted an offer. She's still mine for now. But I think one of the most ambitious and loved constructions for self. And again, you can see very much a kind of experimentation, great experimentation that went on here. Um, and experimentation and also kind of reusing of materials. So years of collecting parquet or leaving materials in there that's just skin plaster with bonding liquid on it. So leaving materials in their raw conditions and how that, I suppose, saves money but makes something more beautiful. I love pink, so the permanent, it's just great to be able to have my own pink kitchen. But it won't be mine for very much longer. And I think the extraordinary thing of this building, and it's been described as an organism for living rather than as a house, because it can kind of change, and we've been using it as an office for the moment. But how you feel very much like you've escaped. Once you've gone past that kind of gate and into the property, you feel very much like you're in the bush, like you're hardly in the city. And yet, if you look from the Melville Koppies, this was the building under construction, you can see how wooded Joburg is, and then how close you are, in fact, to the very urban city of Joburg. And yet, you can have this quite idyllic way of, experiencing life. And I think that's what's so amazing about this building. It kind of changes over the seasons, changes over how you use it, how you, yeah, kind of bringing in the outside, and it's squashed between this rock face and these incredible Dombea tree. And so that was just used very much as of the design of it, and all the rock from the site. The tree shielding us in summer and then letting warmth in winter. The massive gum poles, my love of gum poles again. And that's a sort of a farewell picture, farewell to Melville. So even if there are temporary places, so here we were renting in 44 Stanley, I have this urge to make spaces that are that you can own, that you can claim. So that beautiful space is how you experience the world. My little red house, which was kind of, this was at some point also our office, but it's this arts and crafts house that I got obsessed with drawing in red because it's an arts and crafts house, the red house. And so very quickly, a historic building, well, that we bought that had been kind of messed up. We took all the wrongdoings, all the sort of bits of add-on and whatever, and the swimming pool out, and then completed the little picture of the house, and then on the outbuildings, encapsulated them with the structure. So working again with heritage, but now in an unusual way. And I'll just run through these very quickly now that you know what they are, because I think it's quite a nice quick series. And then the section, so you see how that works with this add-on piece. I keep pointing at the screen here, and then the encapsulation over there. And these two very short videos are really funny because they're not videos at all, but I think they just kind of, they were done a long time ago, and it kind of shows how, I don't know, we do what we can with our SketchUp or whatever animated computer equipment we have. And this one's my favorite, particularly with respect to how it ends. So there you see the barn with its kind of clear sheeting encapsulating it, the space between the buildings. And then all very suddenly, bam, there it is. And so that then is the inside of it. You can see how the roof goes over the sides, the space between. That, I think, shows you very clearly how you can see the existing outbuildings here and then the new structure that goes over that. It was only ever briefly our office. very sadly. We won't go into too much detail. And you can see again also, so whilst all the buildings are different, I think you can see the kind of references and the ideas working through them. This is our house, and I'm up here, actually, where my partner Paris and our daughter Paloma live. And then I decided that I was sick and tired of civilized lawns, and so I made the whole place into this fantastic meadow of poppies and grass, well, felt actually, and plants and flowers. And so I think also how you live in a house and how it kind of changes around you. And that's particularly easy to do in gardening. And I think gardening is just such a sort of long painting in a way that you do, that you change, the seasons change, things get big, they die. It's a wonderful sort of process. That's looking into our bedroom. And you can see how it just sort of all opens up so that the garden is very much in the space, and that's looking out of it. Um, or so it was a kind of a like a again another kind of reference to history. This very a kind of modernist ranch style house, but the roof only came up to this level, so very short spaces. Um, and how, but we loved that. So how we've made that into a space that works for us, but that retains that very lovely character. So we actually put naughty pine ceiling in the roof, which I don't know that good taste would allow, but anyhow. And then, sorry, that's a bit out of focus, but the lights, the colors, the plaster in its raw condition, the reddish one or the grey one. Of course, we needed a cottage, so this here is Slopey Cottage, which over the years has slowly been taken over by the uncivilized garden, and a tree house, which also has kind of over the years, eventually it left because it got taken over by trees. And the chickens also needed a house. So this is their house under construction. This is them in it. So you can see they even got an awning and their ramp so they can get up. There's Big Mama going off to make her eggs. Our farm, which is in Paris or outside of Paris, soon also not to be our farm outside Paris. And again, so this started as a reference, which you'll see in the last sort of series of slides, where the driving between Joburg and Paris and kind of thinking about this Vredefort Dome and the mountains and how did those two relate became very much part of the last part of this presentation. And this here is the future our house, but that's as much as I'm prepared to say. So then I'm going to very quickly go through this, which is because I need 10 minutes for the other. So are you all still, Scooter? Are you all still fine?
Yes, Kate,
Are you all still awake?
we're still very much enchanted. Half past is
Oh,
not
good.
cut off, eh? So
Okay,
you
because
may
I've got
continue.
about another 10, 15 minutes, 15
That's
minutes.
excellent. That's
Okay.
excellent. Thanks,
So I
Kate.
just want to sort of talk about stuff, which are the other things that we kind of engage with as a practice. Competitions, which is a very interesting way of kind of putting your work out there, but also challenging, seeing what other people are up to, engaging. This is a collaboration that we did. And, you know, I think doing projects that some of them will get built, some of them won't, but I think it's a very interesting process to engage with. And then so this image, which you see on the side there, is our Venice piece. Through Leslie Loco's curatorship of the Venice Biennale 2023, we as the Global South were given a platform to reveal, expose, and display the extraordinary architectural work that is being done in our region and the cutting edge, in depth thinking that us all as architects, are engaged in. So just talking how the work of KOA has been exhibited there in Venice, but also in Mandisa in Italy, Sao Paulo, Brazil. And through our involvement in these exhibitions, international talks, adjudicating panels, and the likes, we've been able to be informal ambassadors for an alternative voice to the more dominant Western one. Transforming the profession, well, maybe. I took over the reins as SAIA president from Luyanda. Where's Luyanda's in the top right? Who had already started the hard work of transforming SAIA. Luyanda, Ruben Reddy, then Vice President, Mtembeni Mkhize, then CEO, who sadly passed away due to COVID, and I were a tight team trying in every way to continue and magnify this transformative work. It's no easy feat, I can assure you, and I think, Skura, you really have stuck around, and I know done lots in this regard. It was also made more challenging by the travails of COVID, and dare I say, SAIA's own slow and stubborn resistance to change. In my inauguration, which was online, unlike my whole life, I spoke about my hope to create a collective, inclusive, collegiate architectural community where we would support and inspire each other. I hoped to encourage collaboration, recognize the richness of diversity, and the value of many voices. I invited friends and colleagues from Africa, both South and elsewhere, to join me in speaking with many voices about our profession. These are they who made short movies of their responses to my provocation. The video is online if anyone is interested. And then another part of the transformation of our institute lay with our journal, then called ArchSA, where's my thing there? The management of the SAIA established an interim editorial board of 7 members that aimed to have edition 100. So you can see this was edition 100, which had not, I think the general feeling was that it had not represented a sort of broader sphere of architecture in South Africa. And we really wanted that edition 100 to speak to and include a younger and diverse group of architects, speaking with their many voices. So that is what we managed to achieve. And I think if you can get a copy, it's really a good read. And then last year, this our journal was rescripted and refreshed, updated and transformed. Architecture's, I like to say Architecture's edition 101, edited by Dr. Sichabo Mape, was launched to a great event at Keys Art Mile with much discussion, debate, and good vibes. During Women's Month last year, I collaborated with 3 younger colleagues, who are 1, 2, and 3, namely Gaugelo Lekhalekhala, Guguletu Mtembu, and Gloria Pavita, to create an exhibition called Narratives of Migration and Reclamation, or NOMA, as we call ourselves. This exhibition featured our works that had been exhibited at the Venice Biennale. And Jelan Fal, dear friend and colleague, introduced and opened the exhibition with a really moving poetic speech, and so followed the piece that she wrote for this, which is Architecture's essay, or Architecture, edition 102. So I think that also just speaks to how this kind of engagement with a broader community has been important in the work of KOA, and an interest in education and research, specifically in knowledge systems other than a Western canon, underscores our work. The use of earth as a building material, for example, or an interest in Islamic architecture are threads woven through the work. We often see critiques from our colleagues and other collaborators, and are active in the discourse around transformative practice. Through our participation in lectures, mentorships, and by maintaining links with several schools of architecture, we engage and share knowledge with future generations of architects. Although I was born in Durban and studied in Durban for 2 years, Johannesburg is the city I call home, the place where most of our work takes place, recording, weaving together, and reimagining the layers of the city and its people into new physical landscapes. It is not a city for the faint-hearted or the passive. Here you must actively engage to properly experience and understand her many discourses. This key rack, made by Love Josie, is a variation of their standard skyline, and much to my delight, includes two projects that we have worked on. Number one, the Wits Great Hall, and then the planetarium, now the Digital Dome. So I will end my presentation. There's 10 more minutes. Please be with me. I found it very difficult to move a 10-minute into an hour, so it's slightly longer. But I will end my presentation with another 10-minute presentation I did this year, this time for the Scape Design Emporium. And I read this. In this brief presentation, well, in the last 10 minutes of it, I would like to talk about this beautiful tactile piece, how this beautiful tactile piece was made for the Venice Biennale 2023, how the process of crafting the piece was iterative, moving backwards and forwards between a digital and a handmade way of making. The piece is called Threads and tells the long story of how Johannesburg, Igoli, came to be, from the crashing of a meteorite into the Earth's surface some 2 billion years ago, around the Vredefort Dome area, now a World Heritage Site. How this meteorite threw up rock and debris that landed in an arc shape, burying gold deposits in deep seams below the Earth. It tells of the discovery of this gold in 1886 and the gold rush that followed, how this led to the establishment of Joburg and the start of a dangerous liaison between land and people, between great wealth and exploitation, the story of the migration of people to and from this city of gold. It is a simultaneous telling of many stories, intuitive readings of landscape and social geographies, through age-old traditions of craft and making, narrated by women. For La Biennale, we imagined a tapestry of this story, of this place we call home and where I live. This conceptual image is a photograph of my mudcloth scarf, shaped into a ridge with gold thread woven through it, hovering above a leafy shadow. We started to trace the landscape, the topography, the contours that describe the shape of things, and slowly, iteratively, we arrived at an arc that followed the curve of the gold mines along the ridge. From calico fabric, we made ridges held together by pins, then photographed, cut out, and suspended them digitally in a hand-drawn image of our designated exhibition area. Delving still deeper, we traced the settlements, apartheid settlement patterns of green, wealthy, privileged areas, and parched, treeless, poor townships, with mining waste dividing the two. A digital graphic was manipulated to represent the pattern of the arc-shaped ridge, then colored, and rivers, vital to the extraction of resources from the earth, drawn in. Here, Selma tests our circular design for the loom using an embroidery ring. We wanted the radial form to ensure viewers feel the energy of the explosion in the tapestry and understand how the ridge was formed. This photograph is taken by Damon of Lele working the light in the model, me photographing the handmade model to test the scale, imagining how the piece would be experienced in situ, while Selma videos us all. The loom, designed to be transported in 3 parts to the Karoo, was cut out of cross-laminated timber, then holes laser cut for the pegs to hook the threads. The dogs give scale to the object, unlike a digital screen where tool so critical to space making is often lost or not understood. The dogs have come to visit. Here, Katrini's Kami starts the warping of the tapestry in a radial format. In tapestry, the warp thread is usually vertical, to be followed by the horizontal threading of the weft. For all of us, this was a great experiment, the first time any of us tried this method. The loom only just fits into the studio and is secured using hoop iron found on the farm. Behind the loom is the digital drawing, a pattern like in dressmaking, that is printed one-to-one with a numbering system corresponding to the palette of naturally dyed mohair colors. You can see the chart on the left-hand side of the steps. Nobody knows exactly what thickness of thread will be chosen, how close to the digital drawing the outcome will be. The pattern is followed carefully, but it is skill, intuition, and embodied knowledge, fine-tuned over years of practice, that determine the final edges and shape of the ridge. The mohair tapestry is imagined as a cloak to wrap the body for warmth, with gold mines represented by yellow pom-poms and water courses by blue threads. When the tapestry is cut loose from the loom, it is no longer taut. It collapses slightly and needs to be restrung into a new frame and tightened into shape. Again, digital drawings are fed into a machine and teeth cut precisely into the curve of the steel. Finally, she is ready to start her long journey to Venice. The weavers say a prayer for her and wish her well. Relieved, delighted, tired smiles watch as NASA loads her on the truck. The beaded necklace representing the night sky above the Vredefort dome adorns the body and metaphorically claims the gold extracted from the earth as an African artifact, rather than her once again giving up her raw materials for export. Here Mbali wears the necklace of golden beads that she carefully stitched onto fine mesh and onto the golden frame. The horizontal and vertical nature of beading having been skillfully manipulated by hand to fit our drawing as near as possible. Finally, threads is installed, a sparkling jewel in the dark vastness of the exhibition space. The shadow created below the piece completing the story, describing the geology underground, dark, unknown, and yet so present. Threads from the weft of the tapestry are left long and hanging, tempting you to touch, to feel the underside as you move quietly around the piece. The story of threads is told through making, by many hands, where intuition and embodied memory narrate, where the play of light and shadow, color and pattern animate a collaborative process of healing. In closing, as a practice, we are alive to the social, economic, and environmental impact of architecture, to its potential to destruct and to heal. But with us, everything will be okay. Thank you. It's finished.
Thank you so much for that, Kate. That was just absolutely amazing.
Thank
And
you. And I'm sorry it went
congratulations
on
and
so
well
long.
done on all the work you've done over the years. I think one thing, Kate, is it's one thing to practice and be an award-winning artist, architect, and artist, if you like. But it's also great that you could come into SAIA and make a contribution, not only by building your brand as an architect, but also trying to find ways of making the profession better. I think that was also great and appreciated from what you did with Saya.
Thank you, Skura. I mean, I must say it was a huge challenge, and you know, years later, I wonder what what impact, how much of that was actually made, and how much has lasted. I'm sorry, I'm feeling sort of slightly cynical about it, but perhaps I should come to Durban because maybe you run things differently there. But I think it's been quite a challenge.
Mm,
And I'm sure you experience that. I think there's sort of the old guard and the new guard are still finding their feet after all these years and coming together. And I think we have to persist.
yeah.
It's our uh, you know, profession, and I think that we have to, whatever we can do to try to, I suppose, bring us together, to unify us as a profession. Yeah, and that's not an easy task, and I think
No, it's not. Yeah, yeah.
you know that.
Now,
Yeah.
the pearl in the middle, talking about your work, the pearl in the middle, Lulu Katikati, although meticulously detailed and conceived, right? When you now experience the environment around it, the rock, and you experience the trees, you almost forget about the architecture itself because for most of the time, it frames the environment. Is that the intention?
Absolutely. So I think that the idea behind that, well, there are many ideas, but the way that you experience that building is that the building is, in a way, the armature that lets you experience or have these amazing experiences of this incredible. You almost feel like you're in a forest at certain points. Other times you feel like you're part of the ridge of Johannesburg. You then have a connection to a broader a world. So I think that space can it is not the object, but the space. How space influences how you feel, I think, is a sort of bottom line for me,
Mm,
and that is very true and particular in the Lulu Katikati building, and how that changes, and how it changes your mood, and how, even when I haven't been at a certain floor for a few days, I'll go up there and I'll kind of fall in love again. There's this, or I'll see something I hadn't seen before. At the moment, I'm seeing a lot of defects and like paint that has to get patched up. But you also see, you experience it differently, or if there's a huge thunderstorm. And I think architecture is amazing in how it can kind of contain that and contain you within that. Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure AI and technology will never actually take over our profession. I'll just touch on three things that came up strongly in your work: sketching, the cobbling of the brick that at theater in Soweto, and sketching, painting, and that. I mean, you have to speak to the builder and discuss how you want the bricks done and all of that. I mean, there's always an element of humanness and always an element of sensitivity that architecture demands of us, and I think that will be with us for the longest time. What's your thought on that, Kate?
So, I mean, I'm kind of historically known as a Luddite, but I have tried to be much more open to what are the possibilities of AI. And I think the important thing is to understand that it is a useful tool, but it does not replace and a human. And I think for me that is a very important thing. So that you can use it to your benefit is valuable, but that it isn't you, and it is only AI is only as good as the information that humans give it. And I think that's, I guess, the thing that concerns me is how I think that the further away we get from human touch, from interacting and interrelating as humankind, the more we lose who we are and how we are, and that incredible sort of force of life that human beings have. And so I think I'm beyond saying, oh, it's all nonsense. I think it can be extremely useful, but I think that you have to, as the very beginning of this talk said, remain centered. Remain centered
Mhm.
in who you are and what you think. And yeah, use it to make things easier, or there are some times when things happen that are sort of happen by accident that can be quite lovely, and to be able to take those and then further those, but that it isn't you in and of yourself. And I think that's kind of a really important distinction, that you always remain. kind of in charge of your life, I suppose. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kate. Colleagues, questions, comments? And I find, okay, let Robert go first. Mr. Brusso?
Hi, Kate. You may not remember me, that's not important, but I first met you some 40 years ago when you and your fellow students used to come to the Turkey Run. That was an extraordinary building, but very modest. And it's been an absolute delight and an honor to see how those simple things that the Turkey Run exemplified have been developed, matured, exploited, and used to create, I think, have influenced what is an extraordinary body of work. Congratulations. I was told at the time by one of our mutual friends that you were an extraordinary person, and you have proved that today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. You're now in the video. Oh, and yes, you must take the rubbish.
That one.
Thank you, Rob. Any comments, questions, colleagues?
Surely
so,
there's some questions.
Yeah. I think just most congratulations on the chat. Kate, the work on the Patrick Geddes house, I think it's a very important thing as architects to be able to work with existing buildings. I think one of the talks we had recently, we were talking about this whole idea of going somewhere and starting something new and calling it a smart city instead of being able to adapt existing buildings, in being able to sort of enhance and be able to work with what's there. Not always want to say, okay, I'm flattening that out, I'm starting afresh. In terms of sustainability, I think that's very, very key in the
Yeah.
built environment.
So absolutely. So I think it's sustainability is an incredibly important part of that. But what I also think is that, life is layered. It's not always this one new thing. And I think that there's an incredible usefulness in existing stock of buildings, but I think it's also that there's this history, there's this layering, there's a whole like spirit of people or who have previously used that space. And I think that that's an incredible thing to include or to be able to be part of. So this idea of kind of flattening things and starting again is a bizarre notion for me. I mean, even in flattening a site that is, a site that only has plants on, or I think only has plants on is a completely understatement of what I mean. But I think that it's these kinds of clues and keys that become part of a layered making of space and of life, so that you're not just this one moment in time. You're so many things. And as I speak to you today and I show you all this work that we've done over the years, and certainly all of that is an accumulation of thought of great number of people's thought and energy and effort. And I think that to kind of annihilate that and say we start again is really just a tragedy. I think it's kind of not, it's kind of undoing our, I'm trying to think of the right word, like our spirits or our what came before us and that history, which I think is an incredibly important part of working through, being a South African, being living in this country, knowing our history, etc. So I think that those layers, even something as simple as I mean, Pancho's house was extraordinary to work on because, I knew Pancho very well. He was an incredible person, human being, etc. But even working with something that is really very small or perhaps very ramshackled, whatever it might be, I think is valuable because they're these things that may be unremarkable, but if you kind of take if you look further, they're clues, they're kind of layers. Yeah, I think it's very important.
Mm.
So
And
it's something I love.
yeah, so there was quite a very interesting idea of the wall, which was previously a landscaping situation, I think, where you're saying in the summer you have water over it that comes
Yes.
in the building. I think those for me, apart from, I'm just saying we should not pursue green star rating for corporates as they always would want to. But those are in terms of trying to be green and making buildings quite meaningful, those interventions are quite useful.
So I think that for me, the problem of getting certification and rules is that quite a lot of it is tick boxing, and I'm very concerned about that. I also think that there's a way that buildings have always been made, or a way that traditional buildings have been made, that is frankly just so sensible. And I think that and I'm now shifting a bit away from what your question is regarding the wall. But I think that a response to climate, to context, to where people work, live, etc., is absolutely crucial to addressing anything around sustainability. Because I think sustainability also isn't just about tick, tick, tick through carbon use or not, or water or not. It's also about the kind of sustainability of a community, the sustainability of us as a species. And there are many, many clues that exist in the sites that we get to work on, the people with whom we work. There's an intuitive and an historic knowledge and a knowledge system that we can easily ignore. And I think it's about engaging with that. So, you could see it as a simple thing of sustainability, of, making sure that your carbon footprint is small, but you can also see it as the kind of sustainability of a human spirit, of a knowledge system, of a way of being that I think is important for us as architects to ponder and to work through and in and with. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that rock wall, I mean, you could easily have just tanked it and put a contemporary building in front of it. So, and
Yeah.
I think that also speaks to some of the amazing clients that I've worked with. Doing something like that is brave. It's experimental.
Mm.
And that particular client is somebody I've worked with over many years, and she and I, the building that you see in the beginning with the sort of curvy roof like that was her very first building. So you can see that, she is somebody who is very open to engaging in a creative process. I think that for her is the excitement of it. So even to the extent that she'll risk her building leaking, sort of like what's the word I'm looking for? Intentionally.
Yeah,
It's an amazing process, and I think you can't work through that unless you can work with people.
of
Yeah.
course. Of course. Excellent. Excellent.
Mm. So Scooter,
Okay.
I'm worried that you're the only one asking questions. Are there any?
Yeah, always have tons of questions. Comments, questions,
No,
colleagues?
it's not to undermine your questions at all, but it's just to say, are there others that I can't see?
Yeah. Well, your presentation was also very clear. So
Oh,
I
good.
think
Okay.
everybody really has been taking that in and really, really enjoying it. So it's our last talk of the year, and it's really been an honor that you've graced us.
Thank you, Scooter, and thank you everybody for being here so early at your breakfast meeting. Have a
Yeah,
wonderful holiday, festive season, whatever it is that you're going to do. And yeah, thank you for having me. It's always a
lovely.
pleasure. Great.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Kate.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, everyone. See you in the new year. I wish you all a good break. Thank you.
Is correct. Cheers all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Kate.